Do you want to easily make objects in your photos disappear like this? With a couple clicks, you can do the same. So there's lots of ways to remove objects. The clone stamp tool is one that we'll cover in another lesson, and that's one semi-precise way to do so, but it's more of a manual, time-intensive one. There is a new, or relatively new, content-aware fill option, where basically what we're doing is making a selection, and then Photoshop is magically doing the rest and replacing what our selection is with a new background, or basically making it disappear. So to do this, you have to make a selection. Now, we know that there's lots of different ways to make a selection. You have your marquee tools. We also have our lasso here. So if you haven't used the lasso, you can click the lasso and then just click and drag around your object. So say we're trying to get rid of this guy right here. We're just going to click and drag. You want to make sure you're not touching the edges of your object. And once you complete your sort of shape, you see these marching ants. That's what these little black and white lines, you can call them. The next thing you do once you have a selection is go up to the Edit menu and choose Content Aware Fill. This will bring up a new window. You can see a preview of what's already happening. And there's lots of adjustments you can make, but basically what's happening is on the left, you see this green highlighted area. This is your sampling area. This is what you're telling Photoshop. This is the area I want you to sample from and replace what's inside my selection. So if for some reason this sampling area is selecting something like, see how it's selecting these bushes or trees in the background down here, and we know like we don't want Photoshop to use that selection at all to create this content aware fill, then let's erase that. So we already have this brush with the plus and minus that is on the minus automatically, so we can brush off of this. Say there's something that you do want it to sample from that's not selected, just click over to the plus sign and add that. You also have your lasso tool, so you can adjust your selection and of course your move and your zoom tool. Over on the right hand side, you have your preview area, and here you have a couple different options for one, your sampling area overlay. This is just how this green overlay looks. You can adjust the color and opacity. You also have the sampling area options. So for example, it automatically created that sample area. You could choose a rectangle or custom shape if you want to just do it completely custom. But as we saw earlier, the auto worked pretty good except for this bottom of it, which we erased. Then you have your fill settings. You have different options for that will kind of make this a little bit more precise depending on what you're trying to remove. Color adaptation and rotation adaptation. You can adjust these to high or very high just to see if it helps. For example, if you see something and if you do this and it doesn't look that great, adjust these, try the scale, try the mirror just to see what works for you, because every picture is going to be different. Lastly, we have the output settings. I like to work in a non-destructive way, so I like having it output to a new layer that we can work with. You could also output it to the current layer, so it just kind of saves over the existing layer, and that becomes one layer, or create a duplicate layer, and that's a second layer, but it's still sort of attached to the original image, and you can't just edit that specific part, which you might not need to do, but I'll show you now. If I click OK, see how it creates this new background copy layer? Boop. And if I turn off the background, you can see that it's just this little layer right here. So that's pretty nice to work with. So this was a very easy one though, and that's because the background was really clean. The object was cleanly over the background. So let's try to make it a little bit harder. So in the Project 3 folder, you'll find this photo, and I just wanted to choose this one because it is a little bit more difficult. Let's say we want to remove these water towers from this hill. Like I said, you can use any of these selection tools. One of them that you might want to try is the object selection tool, where you literally go in, similar to the lasso tool, you click and drag around the object, but then Photoshop is going to intelligently select the object that it thinks you want to select. So we can go in here and see that it's selected the water towers. Now it's selected part of the hill down here, and we can actually go in and adjust those things. And you'll want to do that because I want to show you, if we go ahead and go straight to the content aware fill option, if you zoom in here, you can kind of see this sort of like ghosting thing where the edges aren't really you see the edges of your object. And you can adjust these settings and it can help, but what you'll want to do first though is actually go back to the select and mask option. I'm actually going to get rid of this part of the selection down here. Let's make our brush a little bit bigger because I don't want that. And over here is fine too. But then also I'm shifting my edge up 100%. And the reason I'm doing that is because that will help with the edges of the content aware fill being seen or not. So if we go back and we selected OK for that selection, and now we go back to our content aware fill, you'll see that it does a better job. You don't see the edges as much. Now you might want to play around with this. You might want to go in and make a more precise adjustment, and sometimes that object selection tool isn't the best one. Maybe just using the lasso tool would be better. But here we can set our color adaptation to very high, and it starts to do an even better option, a better job. And let's zoom out. I know we're selecting some of this buildings down here, which I don't want. So I'm going to definitely get rid of the buildings because we don't want Photoshop to be using those buildings as part of the selection or the replacement. And then we're going to add some of the other trees and hills over here. Just giving Photoshop more information to work with will generally make this look better. And as I do that, you can probably see here on the right-hand side, the preview looking better and better. Now, of course, this isn't going to be perfect for everything, and I would probably go in here and make a better selection of these towers for the next time. But for a quick edit, for something you're posting to social media, this does a decent job. If I'm printing this out or something like that, I'd probably be a little bit more picky. But then you could also do things like go in and adjust, use the clone stamp tool later on to fix some of the adjustments. So say we go in here now and we see, okay, some of the edges look a little wonky. I did mention that we will go over the clone stamp tool in a future lesson, but basically what this does is it allows you to set your selection and then use it kind of as a paintbrush. So we option click over what we want to use as like our fill basically. So I'm option clicking this hill right here. Now, if I take it over here to this area of the photo, and I actually want to do this, now this is where we get tricky. We want to make the selection, we're actually going to make a new layer with both of these. We're just going to select both of these, turn them into a new layer, and merge them really quickly. So now we can actually make our selection with the clone stamp tool, because before, I was trying to make a selection of somewhere over here, but obviously for this layer right here, background copy, there's nothing there. So with this layer selected, background copy 3 now, we can make our selection over here, and then you can see as I hover over here on the left-hand side where our towers were, I can click and sort of paint on. So again, we have this like very skinny tower thing right here that would have been hard for the content aware fill tool or option to remove. So here's where selecting our option with our stamp tool and then painting over is a better option. Over here you can see there's a couple things that we might want to get rid of. I'm just option clicking to select my selection, and then unclicking option, and then just clicking and dragging and painting. So that does a pretty good job at fixing some of those little issues if you might have them after the fact. All right, so this is a quick and easy, but also a pretty thorough way of removing objects from your photos in Photoshop. I hope this helps, and we'll see you in another lesson.